mass incarceration, criminal justice, because there is a definitely positive correlation, and I think Juan will be probably the best in the position to talk about that and segue into some of that and some of the work that you're doing, because there is definitely a correlation. I mean, we've said this, I mean, more than 20 years we've been talking about, you know, especially those of us who actually went through the criminal justice system, you know, from that end and were arrested and, you know, committed crimes and took responsibility for our actions and then wound up gaining education and consciousness and went through that whole transformation from one side. We understood the relationship between, you know, the things that we're talking about with respect to underrepresentation and the lack of jobs and unemployment and incarceration. So Juan?
There's no question. One of the most important things to recognize is that the job market is defined by the institutional policies of government. And when the job market is defined that way, the policies of government can actually decide who's in the job market, who's eligible, who's considered a very good prospect, and who's not. We've seen it happen in so many ways. We've seen it with respect to the kind of stereotypes that are created because of a person's last name, whether it's or first name for that matter, in the African American community, whether they have a name that sounds black and those individuals don't get called back on resumes, and those of us who are Latino with Latino last names and surnames. So we see all of that. And then the second question, of course, is what you touched upon, that the job labor market is defined as well in terms of eligibility, or I should say the best parts of any person's application and background being defined by whether or not they have any contact with the criminal justice system in the past. All these issues are interrelated. Education. We recently heard President Obama talk about finally opening up Pell Grants again to persons behind the wall. We know that in New York, Governor Cuomo said he was going to do that about a year ago and announced it with a lot of fanfare and then backed off in a heartbeat when he got pressure from the Republicans upstate. And we also know that in New York, the small oases of education opportunities for people inside the wall is really because a small number of colleges, Bard and others, are actually doing work with private funding. The need is there. The need is there, and all the social science points to the benefits of having education opportunities for people inside prisons. Now the question is catching up public policy with what the social science literature says. And that's always that disconnect is all political. Nobody wants us to pay attention to what happens behind the wall, in large part because the country is consistently really doing only one thing good, and that's to punish people and punish them all over again. So we see all those connections between the job market, housing opportunities being foreclosed because of people with previous criminal convictions, education opportunities not being provided for people inside, etc. Everything is joined. So I'm glad that the Campaign for Fair Representation taking on these issues, but they're all interrelated.
Oh, for sure.